Hi, everybody. Welcome to Dive Deep. If you don't know me, I'm Shelby Cornett. I'm the ministry assistant at Cambridge City Christian Church, and I'm with Danny.
Hello, Shelby.
Hello.
I see you've got like lots of papers
I
today
do.
with notes.
I have 4 pages, but 2
Oh.
of them are irrelevant.
Wait a minute. Let me see that real quick.
Mhm.
So I want to show this to everybody. So she sat down and she had 2 pages sitting next to each other, but then there's the. And I'm like, wait, she was gonna like ambush me with her notes.
I know.
So,
But these 2 really don't mean anything. They're just extra. These were my video notes.
Yeah, that was close.
And then I summarized it with 3 points.
Okay. Wow, you're summarizing with 3 points. She's turning into a preacher. That's what preachers do. They summarize with 3 points.
Yeah. Okay. I'm really not as organized as it looks like.
Looks pretty organized to me. All right. No, it's good to join you, Shelby.
Yeah. So last week, the sermon was about cynicism and raising your expectations. Mm-hmm. Can you give a brief summary?
Yeah, so we were looking there in Mark, and we were talking about the lame man who was brought down through the ceiling by his friends. It's a really neat story, isn't it? You know, they come some distance. We don't know how far. Maybe they live right there in town. We don't know, but they brought their friend. They carried him on a mat, and they come in this house that Jesus is in, where he's teaching, is just totally like jam packed with people. Mm-hmm. And rather than giving into the cynicism of, oh well, we can't help our friend, oh he's never going to get better, they instead went up on the roof, which wasn't uncommon for people to go on roofs back then. They had steps usually that went up to them. But what was uncommon was that they dug a hole through the roof. I was thinking about that, like, if that was at my house, of course, it's a little different today with your roof, right?
Right.
But that would have been a costly expense to fix.
I'd be kind of angry.
Yeah, I would be a little upset. But they were just so desperate, and they weren't going to allow that cynicism to stop them from getting their friend what he needed, and that's what they did. And it's a really neat story, and so that was kind of what we looked at, was the hearts of the friends. So often we focus on the healing in the story, and we should. I mean, what Jesus did was absolutely unbelievable. It was amazing. But his friends are the ones that really jump out to me in this story.
Yeah.
I mean, and so yeah, that was where our focus was in talking about how they didn't allow cynicism to stop them from doing what needed to be done.
Right.
You know.
So I didn't have questions this week. I just put like 3 points that like stood out to me. The first one was about the friends and how like the faith they had to go through all that work, and well, to dig through the roof, you have to have a lot of faith to be able to do that. And
yeah, you have to have a lot of faith that they're not going to come up there and like beat you up and stuff for digging through the roof and all that. Yeah.
So the fact that they did all that, they had to have faith, and then were a really dedicated friend too. So I thought, I hope if I was in that situation, that I would be able to do the same thing.
Yeah. That's a really good insight. Like, to what lengths would we help a friend in need, and maybe more specifically, help a friend who needs Jesus?
Yeah.
They were willing to have people get angry with them by digging through a roof because they were that desperate enough for their friend to see Jesus.
Right.
I mean, how many roofs are we digging through, to bring our friends to Jesus? It's a good question. And, I think we would all like to think that we are. And of course, many of us, I think we do pray for our friends that maybe are far from Jesus, but what are we doing to get them to Jesus? Yeah. That's really good. Yeah.
Another thing I didn't write down about that I was just thinking about is, as I was listening to it when I was taking my notes, and he said, like, your sin is forgiven. And I was like, but what about, like, is he going to walk?
Yeah. When you first read it, it is kind of interesting that Jesus doesn't heal him first and then forgive him of his sins. He forgives him first.
Yeah.
And then later heals him.
So that's like the foundation. Like, that's what was most important to Jesus, was that foundation.
Yeah. There's something else too that's really important here that I didn't mention in the message because of time and whatever. So back in the times of Jesus, many people had this idea, and it's still around today. Maybe not so much within the church, or at least it shouldn't be, but there is this idea of karma, right? Where you have bad things happen to you because you've done bad things. There was an idea within Jewish society, and I don't know how they got this idea because it's not in the Bible, but there was an idea within their society that this man was lame because of something he had done. So what Jesus here was trying to do was combat that mindset by first forgiving him of sin, by showing that, hey, I'm forgiving him of sin, but he's still lame.
Right.
Okay. So that's part of it. And then the other part of it too is at the very foundation. The problem, all hurt and all pain and suffering in this world is because of sin. Mm-hmm. Not because of our sin individually per se, although there are some sins that some pain and suffering we go through that is because of our sin. Sometimes people maybe engage in an activity and maybe they get in an accident or they get a disease, and there are repercussions to that. So I think what Jesus here is trying to point out is no, that isn't the reason, but the fundamental reason for all of our suffering is sin.
Right.
When the world, back in Genesis 1 and 2, when sin entered the world, mm-hmm. that's why the man is lame, as well as all the other horrible things that's happened in the world then and since and before. So, yeah.
So it's one of those, like, as I read more, I'm like, okay.
Yeah, okay. Jesus didn't forget.
I get it.
He didn't forget to forget to heal him.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that was cool.
Yeah.
My next point that I put was, like, that there's a plan for me that's greater than mine. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that's a hard pill to swallow, I think. And that it's easy to be cynical when things aren't going the way we want them to. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I mentioned just briefly in the message Sunday that the reason we often become cynical isn't because bad things happen. It's because bad things happen over and over and over and over. That's when we get cynical. Like, mm-hmm. typically our faith can handle a bad thing or two.
Yeah.
But when it happens over and over again, that's when cynicism, because then we think it's just never going to get better because we have this idea that this cycle is unbreakable. Right. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, and then that's kind of like we talked about last week with prayer. It's like we're taught to be dependent on ourselves and not anybody else. So I think that's another thing that's hard sometimes is, okay, why isn't my plan working? But we don't know what our actual plan is.
Yeah, I mean, the best thing to do is to try to do God's will. And this brings in a whole bigger question of what is God's will. Mm-hmm. And we could go all kinds of directions there, but I would say, simply put, God's will is just, so many people focus on the specifics. Like, God wants me to do, to work at this job or go to this school or what, I don't focus so much on that, and I don't encourage people to do that. I just say, what are you doing to love God and love others? That's God's will for everybody. It's for us to love him and to love other people. I don't think God is concerned as much about what we do individually to accomplish that. He's just concerned that we're accomplishing it, that we're doing that. Not
like
so
the
much
big picture.
Yeah, the big picture, and so I think you can know what God's will is for you. It's to love God and to love other people. If you're doing that, you're walking in his will. Now, you may do that in a million different ways. It may be, well, for me, it's being a preacher. For you, it's being, helping in our office, being a mom.
Yeah.
Me being a dad. I mean, we do it in a lot of different capacities, but the most important thing is that we love God and we love others.
Right. I didn't think about it like that.
Yeah, and I think that's where a lot of people get mixed up. And honestly, it paralyzes some people. Like, I don't know what God's will is. I'm going to pray more. I don't know what God's will is. I'm going to pray more. I'm not saying we shouldn't pray to walk in God's will, but we can go out and love God and love others no matter what we do, just about it, outside of sin.
Yeah.
We can do that in a million different ways. So don't focus so much on the specifics. Focus generally on what you do.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes
I want to ask you a question. All right.
Okay.
So what did you think of these teachers of the law in the story?
The ones that were, I can't say
how. They were real jerks.
Yeah. That's not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What did you think of those guys?
I just felt like they were being really, cynical, obviously. That's the point. Yeah. But they're like selfish, like, and not thinking about they weren't loving others.
No.
So
and they thought they were loving God.
Yeah.
By going after Jesus and criticizing him. Yeah.
Right. I think they were being like they had double standards, maybe.
If that how what in what way?
Like they were chasing after God, but weren't concerned with what he wanted to do for others. Does that make any bit of sense?
That makes a ton of sense.
Okay.
Because I think that's where a lot of Christians have fallen off the wagon, so to say, is in their pursuit to please God, they destroy other people.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what Pharisees.
They're judging.
Yes, and that's what Pharisees do. I mean, Pharisees are concerned with the ways of God, even if it comes at the expense of people, which makes no sense because God loves people.
Yeah.
So you're saying, well, it's okay for me to hate people, but I'm pursuing God.
Right.
Really?
That made me think of the church logo with the going up and then coming down. They're only concerned with one way.
Yes. Yeah, that's it. And I mean, just think of these guys. I mean, they come in. There's 50 people. They come in. I'm sure they come in their pomp and circumstance. Everybody's like, it's the local teachers of the law, and it may not have been local. We don't know, but it's entirely possible these guys could have come from Jerusalem and they were checking Jesus out, just being cynical.
Yeah.
Wanting to find what's wrong with him. And here this man comes down through the roof, and they should have been like, wow, these guys really care about their friend and all that. But no, when Jesus says he's forgiven, they freak out. And that's why Jesus then heals the man, because he's trying to prove to them. He's like, you know what? It's easy for me to say your sins are forgiven. A lot harder to say you get up and walk after you've been,
right.
Paralyzed. He hasn't been able to walk, lame. So, but yeah, these guys are something. And this wouldn't be the first instance that he would have with them. But yeah, your point's really good. I like what you said there, though, that we do often, people in the pursuit of God often destroy the lives of people. And that's sad. But it happens.
You can love God, but not love others.
Yeah. And you can't do that. It's all a package deal.
Right.
So, yeah. I don't know. I just thought I'd ask you about those guys, see what you thought. So.
That threw me off guard.
Yeah.
I usually don't answer questions.
Yeah.
My last point, I just wrote it down because I wrote it so many times listening to the sermon, was to have faith. Like, even when it seems impossible. Yeah. Because obviously God is so much bigger than us. So we should continue to have faith.
Yeah, and that's why I think whenever we're confronted over and over again with bad things, that leads to cynicism. That's why we have to keep going back to the source, and we have to remember that God is still present, that God is still there, and that there may be really good reasons why these things are continually present and keep popping up, because God might be using those things to teach us. That's something I've learned in the last few years. I've had a few things in my life that just don't seem to go away. I've never had to deal with that before. Like, I'd have bad things come up, but they would go away after a period of time. But I've had several things that's been going on now for 4 or 5 years.
Right.
And at first, I was finding myself getting more and more cynical. But then as time's gone along, I've come to realize, okay, wait a minute here, Danny. Don't get cynical. God is trying to teach you something. And maybe the reason it's not going away is you haven't learned.
Yeah.
And that's really changed the way I look at it. Like, now I see life as maybe more of a classroom and less as a proving ground.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. So,
like, God's the principal.
He's trying to teach, and I'm kind of the bad kid in the back of the class that's been throwing spitballs and paper airplanes and not paying attention. And he's like, wait a minute, okay, you didn't get it. And I feel like every time, like if a kid was bad in class, I don't know if this happened. You're a few years younger than me. But like when a kid was bad in class, what does the teacher usually do? That moves them to the front of the class, right? Like they're sitting in the back. Because like on the school bus and in the classroom, a lot of times it was the kids who misbehaved the most that were in the back, right? So the teacher, that's God with me. Like I was in the back and he keeps moving me further and further up, because I wasn't paying attention to what he had to teach me.
Yeah.
So I don't know how that illustration, but anyway. Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So God, now I think of him as a grandpa and a dad and a teacher and a scientist and a bus driver now.
God, the bus driver. Yeah. Yeah. But it's funny you say that because God does have those attributes in him. Yes, he's our father, but he's also like a grandfather. He's also, I mean, it's, I guess in certain ways like a teacher or a bus driver, I mean, yeah, I mean, we are the image of God.
Yeah.
So we're going to reflect certain things about him in the things that we do. And yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good thoughts, Shelby.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I'm growing in my thoughts.
You are. You're growing in your faith. It's been neat to see. So, yeah.
So that was all I had. Did you want to add anything else?
No, actually I didn't. I just wanted to know what you thought about those teachers, the teachers of the wall. Those guys, they were kind of
jerks.
Yeah. That's a good way of putting it. That's the best way to put it. They're jerks. Yep. They were. No.
So
nothing else.
Okay. Yep. Well, thanks guys for watching, and we will see you next week.